How's it going? Welcome back, my wonderful wise ones, to a fantastic video today as we take a look at the sequel of High on Life. High is Life? Ow. High is Life? So today we're going to be taking a look at High on Life 2. Yes, that's right. Now this game, I've got to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of the first game. And that wasn't down to it being a bad game or anything like that. It was mostly down to its writing and its jokes. Now, I know a lot of people love that Rick and Morty humor. I myself enjoyed it as well when I was a, teenager or early 20s. But I don't really find that kind of stuff funny anymore. And to me, Rick and Morty was only good in its first couple of seasons. So I've probably pissed off most people watching this video by now. So now we can actually discuss the game without having people just fanboy about it, because I do actually think the second game is much better, and I can say that objectively, even though I'm not a huge fan of the writing style. But I would say that the writing has improved a lot more, because if you don't know, basically it's now separated itself from Justin Roiland after that whole controversy and all that kind of stuff. So the writing is a little bit more in its own universe now, in the High on Life universe, and it's not relying completely on, that kind of Rick and Morty type humor, especially with the same voices and stuff like that. It's much more diverse.
Hey Morty, I have important news. It's a party. It's a Morty. It's a party.
So as I go into these positives and negatives, I will say if it is more objective or subjective, and I will try and keep my own opinions until the end of the video. But I do think it is a much better game overall, because they've added a lot more mechanics this time around. Skateboarding is the biggest thing I can think of, and it just has that nice charm of that kind of, early PS2 energy, of like Ratchet and Clank, Spyro. When everything had skateboards in them and that kind of mechanic was everywhere, I really missed that kind of time in gaming. I think even Jak and Daxter had it. But I just think it's very creative this time around, because basically skateboarding, it isn't just a gimmick in this game, it's actually how you traverse in the world. And in this game, you're basically fighting these kind of mega pharmaceutical companies. You're kind of unraveling a conspiracy, so it's a little bit different compared to the first game where you're just going out and, chasing down different targets and stuff like that. But it still has that exploration, but the levels themselves are much bigger this time around, with much more interaction, and I'll talk about that more later. Okay, so the first positive in this High on Life 2 review is simply the fact that now there's so much more interaction. There's more interaction with the NPCs that you come across. There's kind of these hub areas where you can basically talk more with individual characters. And this time around, you're not limited to like a few responses. You can actually respond in many different ways. I wouldn't say it's RPG-like in any way, but there are different responses depending on what gun you want to choose. So each different weapon will have their own responses, which I like because it adds flavor text. It changes some actual choices in the game as well, so it adds to replayability later down the line if you like that kind of thing. So everything that you do, you can use for skateboard. When you're shooting, when you're platforming, when you're solving puzzles, they all require the skateboard, and levels themselves are actually designed around this feature. So that means everything has grind rails. You can do tricks to get, bonuses and stuff like that. Instead of it being like a tactical cover shooter, it's almost got that kind of boomer shooter energy, but like very, very fast and with a lot of platforming involved, and I really like that kind of thing. Like I said, it really does harken back to the days of the PS2 and that kind of stuff. I see a lot of people saying that this is kind of like Ratchet and Clank meets Cyberpunk, and I would agree, because it is very creative. You are going to different alien worlds, meeting interesting characters, but the humor is very different compared to Ratchet and Clank, OG Ratchet and Clank, where that was all very dark kind of satire, making fun of mega corporations and commercialism and all that good stuff. That's why the OG Ratchet and Clank was just amazing. This is much more over-the-top satire. And if you've ever watched a Rick and Morty, episode, you will know what kind of humor I'm talking about. It's almost like beating a dead horse over and over again until it becomes funny. And I don't think that all the jokes in this are bad. I think a lot of them are actually good. but it really does depend on your sense of humor. So just be aware that there is a lot of dialogue in this, and it is a comedy game, so it's going to be, spitting jokes at you pretty much 24/7. But there's so much more here that makes it a cool game.
Hey, Morty, I have important news. It's a party. It's a Morty. It's a carity.
There's also lots of new weapons this time around, and of course that means new characters, because in this game your weapons are the characters, so it is very unique in that regard. And also I like the fact that now the guns aren't just like different weapons, but you need them to solve puzzles. So you have to, mix and match between, different weapons. Like one might give you a platform to get to higher ledges, another one might, kind of freeze time in certain situations or slow down objects and stuff like that. So you have to kind of balance these different weapons, jump back and forth between them to unlock puzzles, to do platforming, and then when you add the skateboarding mechanic on top of it, it just makes it feel very fluid and aggressive and fast and just fun and very responsive, if I'm honest. So gameplay wise, it's a huge benefit over the first game. And then of course we can talk about the combat itself. Now combat, like I said, it's already much more improved thanks to the skateboarding mechanic now, because now it's not just verticality in the gameplay like in the original game, where you can grapple hook and stuff like that. It's got that as well, but then also the skateboarding stuff. So you can go very fast across these levels. Like I said, the levels themselves are built around the skateboarding mechanic, so there are, different things to jump over to get, higher jumps, to kind of integrate with the verticality of the level as well, which I really like. And then just shooting in general is much more snappier, responsive. Like I said, you can use the weapons abilities not just for platforming, but also sometimes in combat. So there's a lot of, kind of mixing with these different gameplay elements all together, but they all kind of bounce off of each other, so it just feels much more responsive. Bosses as well, I feel like they are more interesting this time around. They have more, gimmicks to them. Each boss, has their own different, attack patterns and their own special like little gimmick, like a shield that you have to take down, or, like destroying certain platforms that you have to keep going up and up to kind of avoid, like the level being destroyed and stuff like that. So there's just different things, and it keeps it feeling fresh throughout the game.
This is where the fun begins.
So now let's talk about some negatives of High on Life 2, and I'm going to preface this point by saying it is a subjective point, and you might absolutely love the humor in this game. If you love the first one, you're gonna like this, but honestly, I like this game a lot more from the gameplay so far, because this is all based on the early access, by the way, as it is an early review. But the early gameplay that I've seen, it's just a lot better. This is, what I saw at the event, but it's basically less Rick and Morty, more, characters being kind of satirical with one another instead of just kind of breaking the fourth wall, and just that kind of slapstick comedy that Rick and Morty is kind of known for now. It's a little bit more witty, instead of just being, like, haha, isn't this random, isn't this gross, isn't this shocking, and that's kind of what happened to Rick and Morty. In my opinion, it just lost the kind of writing, the smart writing of the first two seasons, and this is much better compared to that kind of style of humor. So if you're not a huge fan of Justin Roiland and that type of humor, I think you'll enjoy it a lot more.
Hey, Morty, I have important news. It's a party. It's a Morty. It's a carity.
For me, I personally prefer more darker humor, much more kind of sarcastic, just offbeat type humor. So it's not really for me, but I'm sure a lot of people will click with this. And the writing isn't as constant as the first game, but still these guns will not stop yapping. So you have to bear that in mind. This is not a serious game. This is not something that you can kind of chill out to. There will be constant commentary. So if you like your games to yap back at you, then yeah, you might enjoy this. And the next point I want to highlight is the art style. I would also say that this is a negative because it's very overstimulating and not in a good sense, because it's trying to do so many different things at once. Like, I like the fact that there's so much variation in, just one level alone, and it's kind of an open level that you get to explore, but a lot of it just doesn't look that good, if I'm honest. So what I mean by this is the art style just isn't coherent throughout the game. So at one level section, it can look very beautiful, like something out of Cyberpunk, and then the next, it can look like something out of Splatoon.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
I just don't think the art style is fantastic. It's kind of all over the place, and it's just trying to give you as much as possible these very, saturated colors to kind of just keep you distracted, in my opinion. And that goes down to the graphics as well. There's lots of artifacting, lots of blurry textures and stuff like that. Now, a lot of people won't care about this because the gameplay itself is so fun, and because it is so much more fast this time around compared to the first game, you're going to be, whizzing by things so quickly, it won't matter. But to me, I'm someone who is, very autistic about details. And yeah, it just doesn't have that level of details I like in my games. So now for this High on Life 2 review, I'm going to end it on a positive note. And the final positive I want to give it is the fact that there is always what the fuck moments, and there's always new stuff being introduced. Think of games like Split Fiction, where they're constantly introducing new ideas, new mechanics to you. I think a lot of modern games don't do this anymore. Because they're afraid to take risks. But I really like the fact that High on Life 2 does this. You'll basically be playing a bunch of mini-games throughout the whole missions and levels themselves. They'll have mini-games within it. A lot of there's so much more interaction, like I said, with the NPCs, dialogue choices, mini-games that you can play in these kind of hub areas where you can just kind of talk and engage in the world. And then the missions themselves will have often different little mini games, like playing, darts or bar games, or like dancing games, arcade games. Like I said, the skateboarding itself is a mini game, and you will be, doing that quite a lot in these kind of like little mini extra games. Just, skateboarding, kind of references to Tony Hawk and that kind of classic PS2 era of gaming. And I really like that. I just like the fact that there's a lot of different variation in this. And yeah, that's basically each level will introduce something new, and then there's always a big boss at the end. So it's just like a nice gameplay package of it. Basically is constantly changing things up, so you don't really get bored, and that is a big positive in my opinion. So there you go, that is my High on Life 2 early review. I do think it is a good game. It might not necessarily be the game for me, but it doesn't mean it's a bad game. So let me know what you think, weigh up the positives and negatives for yourself, and if the writing does land for you, then I think that this is going to be a fantastic game, and certainly much better than the first game, which many people enjoyed. But if you're like me and you're not so sure about the writing, will the gameplay be good enough to, be worth it? Well, that just depends, because there were parts that I found funny, but overall, the writing just might be a deal breaker for some, so just let that be a warning. Thank you so much for watching, my wise ones. I'll be seeing you in the next video. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, give the video a like, that really does help a lot, and have a blessed day. Peace out.
Hey, Morty, I have important news. It's a party. It's a Morty. It's a charity.